to DEFCON 3. I'm KT McFarland. You know, you watch the news and you think we're not going to ever hear anything bigger than what's just happened. So then we have the Boston Massacre, and now we have letter bombs, or not letter bombs, but poison letters that are going to the president and to Capitol Hill. The guy I want to talk to about this is somebody who really is very familiar with it in his own background. Aaron Cohen, who is a former Israeli Defense Forces guy who has a security firm in Los Angeles. I really wanted to ask you, because you're familiar with the pattern of these things being in Israel. Israel has bombings all the time. They know what to look for. They seem to turn them around quickly. What is your sense of what happened in Boston? What should we be looking for now as we're trying to find who's next?
Well, I think that, Katie, I think that the focus needs to be right now, it's got to be a combination of things. Obviously, we want to pinpoint who the culprits were, what terror group. The reason why I say that is because now we have letters with poison being sent to members of Congress, to our president. So obviously the first thing is, and up in the forefront is, trying to pinpoint which exact terror group was responsible for this, who are the actual operational members of those terrorist group, where did they get the financing and the training so that we can go after the leadership, and then obviously put the pinch and the squeeze on the person behind this. Mm-hmm. It's not so much the ground operative as it is the leadership. It's important to remember that Israel focuses on going after the leadership and the management. The ground level suicide bomber or operations person who's detonating the bomb is a very small piece of the counter-terror layering. It's the intelligence to get to the leadership. The second part, to answer your question, is what we should be doing now, in addition to finding out and honing in and funneling who was responsible, is making sure that this doesn't happen again. Now, let me make it clear. In Israel, we know that you cannot protect every pipeline, you cannot protect every building, but Israel stops hundreds of terror attacks a year because of their intelligence services and their ability to use real-time information to go after that leadership, which includes having the proper security in place. Now, it's a challenge in this country because America is really a teenager going through security puberty, so we don't expect everyone to be perfect. But as we've seen, there was a terrorist attack. A specific person went to a specific place for a specific reason. I don't believe in coincidence. Layer on top of that the fact that there was ricin just sent to the President of the United States along with members of Congress and other leaders. This is not a coincidence. It's not a lone wolf. This is a thoroughly plotted terrorist attack on multiple levels in order to create fear and harm to innocent civilians. So those are the two important things, in my opinion.
Aaron, what we're looking at on the screen right now is some of the evidence photos from the Boston bombing. I'm curious, though, a number of people have said, well, this must be a lone wolf. There's no indication that it's a bigger plot. You seem to think otherwise, that it may be an operational guy, but there may be a sort of brain trust or somebody who's getting the financing for it. Now, what leads you to that conclusion?
Well, it's because I come from the world of counterterrorism. I served in Israel's counter-terrorist special operations unit. And the signature and the pattern from what I saw on 9/11 and what's happening now, there's multiple attacks happening at the same time. They're simultaneous. One, there were two explosives that were set off. Two, there were improvised explosive devices that we've seen in Pakistan. We've seen them in Afghanistan. We've seen them in Egypt. We've seen it in Yemen. There's a signature. The other thing that leads me to believe that this is terrorism is because coming from the counter-terror world, we frame an attack such as an explosion against civilians, an act of terror unless it's deemed otherwise. The U.S. is having a bit of a problem with this right now, which is understandable. Like I said, they're just figuring this thing out, which is very complex, given the civil liberties restrictions and the comfort restrictions. But the truth is that the Americans, and I'm an American, come from the law enforcement expertise, and that is investigating, and that is trying to figure out who the perpetrator was. The difference, that's the subtle difference. They want to try and figure out who committed the crime. We are going to look at it as terror, and we are going to work backwards from that. And until it's fully dismissed 100% KT as not being a terrorist attack, we will consider it an act of terror. And that's a question of mindset and framing. And maybe I'm just too Israeli that way. I'll take that. To me, it's a compliment. It just adds more expertise to the marketplace so that, we can get, and people like me can get out there to share what we know.
But Aaron, if it is then something more than just a lone wolf, or let's say two lone wolves, one part of the Boston bombing, another lone wolf sending poison letters to Congress and to the White House. Should we expect more attacks of some sort in the next couple of days?
Yes. To say in the next couple of days would be naive. I don't want to try and predict when terror will happen, but I will say this. America has been attacked by a terrorist group. The lone wolves, per se, are never alone. Timothy McVeigh, although he was a radical and a special forces dropout who specifically went after a government building because of bitterness, is a different, unique case where, in this case here, terrorists, and it's important for me to bring this out, actively use the internet and the media and psychological propaganda to incite, recruit, and train these lone wolves. So in my opinion, and the way I frame it is, there's no such thing as a lone wolf today with the internet and with all of the social access that the average person with zero training can get to. And that's my fear, and that's why we need to spend as much time in this country focusing on not just who the culprit was of this brutal, disgusting attack, but how to make sure that we stop future attacks from happening. That's the responsibility, in my opinion, right now.
Okay, well, that's really fascinating, especially given the background that you've had as a commando in the Israeli Defense Forces and someone who's dealt with these kinds of things over decades. Aaron Cohen, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be back to you shortly.
Thanks so much, KT.
I want to read a really ironic comment that we've just got from Ryan Denny. He says, "I thought the war on terror was over." Well, doesn't sound like it has been. We may have thought it, we may have been lulled into it, but it doesn't seem to be the case after this week. We're going to take a break and then come back and talk about we're going to pivot to East Asia and China.